Today, we are going to be talking about the translation challenges and solutions that translators found um, in the book The Stranger by Albert Camus. So, here's an outline. We're going to go over these different sections, give a little bit of context to the novel, and then go over some problems that translators faced and how they addressed those challenges. Um, so, first of all, what is The Stranger? It's a short existential novel. It is written by Albert Camus. It was originally written in French and it was published in 1942. Since then, it has been translated many times and has in many languages. The plot it follows the main character who is just kind of an ordinary guy. His mother dies at the beginning of the book, and things happen in his life. For whatever reason, he ends up on a beach and ends up killing somebody. He's arrested, obviously, and tried, and it kind of follows him through this experience in a very existential and absurd theme. It really, this book explores kind of themes of alienation and search for meaning in a world that maybe where there isn't meaning, or it just the world feels indifferent. And that's basically the context that you need to know. It was originally written in French, like I said, and initially it could only be printed with a certain level of books because it was published during the Nazi occupation of France. This quote, I feel like, captures a little bit more of the depth that is conveyed in this book with the very few words because it is such a small book. So it says here, on the surface, The Stranger gives the appearance of being an extremely simple, though carefully planned and written book. It would take a book at least the length of a novel to make a complete analysis of meaning and form from the correspondences of meaning and form in The Stranger. So what we can take away from this is, while it is short, the way that it is written, the tone that it has, and everything that goes into it carries a lot of meaning that can be analyzed and studied, which obviously poses a lot of translation difficulties, trying to maintain that depth of meaning as much as possible, as we've learned in class. So, some questions that I'm going to pose at the beginning that you can consider as we continue to review the slides. The first is, how does understanding the culture and tone of words impact translation decisions? Is it a problem that multiple major translations of a work of literature exist? Why or why not? How do we understand which translations are better than others, especially when it is impossible to communicate with the author and clarify more specific meaning and tone questions? So, the first thing that I'd like to briefly go over, we could go into a lot more depth about this, but are some of the translations of The Stranger. There are many, many, many translations of this book. There's four main ones. And there was what is considered the classic was the translation by Stuart Gilbert in 1946. It was published as The Outsider and then later in America as The Stranger. There was a more recent translation in 1982 by Joseph Loretto, also published in the UK as The Outsider. The most highly acclaimed of the translations was published in 1989 by Matthew Ward, and that one is arguably the most well-read translation. Many people argue that that is the most accurate English translation of the book. And then there's also some more recent translations, including translation by Sandra Smith in 2012. And again, that was published in the UK as The Outsider and in the US as The Stranger. And she based her translation off of a recording of Camus reading the novel on French radio. So each translation, even outside of these four, faces and kind of addresses translation problems in different ways. But we're only going to really focus on three general problems just for the sake of time, even though it's really interesting and this book is really cool. So if you have time, maybe after finals. But the first problem that we're going to talk about is the challenges that are faced with even just translating the title. So in French, this is the French right here. really speak French, but that's the French. And there's two main translations that come from this: The Stranger and The Outsider. And so both the translators kind of faced different challenges in deciding which of these most adequately represents the book. So both titles capture the central theme of the novel, which is that the main character has this profound sense of detachment from society. And both of these translations capture that really well. And if you look at the definitions of both words, there are a lot of similarities. However, the 1946 translation that opted for The Outsider emphasizes more the main character, Mersault's status as an outsider, kind of to societal norms and expectations. And it highlights his existential alienation, basically his separation from everybody else, how he is an outsider. And then in the 1988 translation of Matthew Ward, and then other people also use The Stranger as the title, which is more close to the way that it sounds in French. This choice is it shifts the focus to the nature of who the main character is, who Mersault is, and it emphasizes his role as being a stranger to the reader's understanding. And so, even with this simple initial thing, we can see that translators have to make these decisions that, in some cases, very subtly change the meaning and the way that a reader comes into the book, approaching the what they're going to read. So that's the first thing, and you can see that they approach these in different ways. And part of the reason that some people stayed away from The Stranger is there was another book translated or published at the same time that was also translated as A Stranger. And so we see that there's a lot of things that play into these translations. The second thing that just from the get-go poses translation challenges is the opening line of the book, and just how important tone is, and how important conveying that tone is in translation. So the first line of the book is this in French, and we can see that there's the two main translations. One is "Mother died today" and "Maman died today." And even just reading this, the tone is different. And in reading the notes of these translators, you see that they seriously considered how to translate this, because there's a certain level of emotional weight and thematic significance that comes with this first line, and it's important to try to nail that on the head. So Gilbert's choice of saying "Mother died today" is often criticized for its detachment and lack of emotional resonance. So people that have read that have since said that argue that this maybe isn't the best translation because of the tone difference, even though on like a word for word level it's similar. While with Ward's translation, we see that the line has like a subtle but very crucial kind of alteration where it just uses the French word maman. And I think that more effectively conveys the tone. And so here we can see kind of a problem in translation or a challenge, and then how two different translators chose to approach that and how it changes the tone. And then finally, conveying deep existential themes. These are also addressed very differently between the two translators. And Gilbert focuses more on the absurdity and the detachment from societal norms, while kind of preserving some of the philosophical depth, while Ward focuses more on like the existential crisis that the main character is facing and explaining that with more modern and accessible language. So finally, here are my key terms, and here are some resources. The first resource offers range of synonyms and also idiomatic expressions. Blogs and websites are super useful. Dictionaries are super useful. And there's also a lot of scholarly literature written about this book specifically that translators can turn to as they're looking to solve these problems. Here are some other sources that I have. Thank you for watching. And yep, that's it.